I'm not looking for a best friend in my wife.
Like, I don't want to get too comfortable with you from the perspective of like, I want you to be my husband. I want you to look at me as your wife.
Or if you're fired up, I know I'm liable to say things I don't mean just because I'm argumentative. So for me, it's critical that I don't say anything until I've cooled off a little bit. And then we can have a discussion.
That's actually a very interesting point. And I never thought of it that way. But damn it, don't you hate it when they're right? You and I have very strong boundaries for each other, which then those boundaries also help to not go overboard, no matter how emotional you get.
By the way, if you guys want to know a great negotiation tactic, one of my favorite. All right, and we're back on CATAMANIA.
You're doing the intro again.
Welcome.
Are you the host now? You
I'm not the host.
My podcast?
I do not. But I'm honored to be a guest.
Good time of the day, everyone, and welcome to this week's CATAMANIA episode. As per usual, if you like this episode and this podcast, please do give it... Can you say please do? Is that English? Please do give it.
You can just say please give it.
Please give it thumbs up, hearts, comments.
People say smash subscribe. I hear that a lot.
Smash subscribe?
Smash the subscribe button.
I've never heard that before.
You listen more, bros?
You're a little bit more, yeah, the world of your online world is different from my online
different.
world.
The algorithms are different.
Anywho, please click, smash, whatever you need to do, the subscribe button. Follow and share with a friend. Your support means more than you know. Which is why, one of the main reasons I decided to bring back to you, your guys' favorite guest, my husband, Alexander. Welcome, Alexander, to my podcast.
Thank you for having me back.
To be quite honest with you, you are one of my favorite people to talk to, if not
That's
like
good.
my
It's a good thing.
favorite.
Considering we're married, it's important.
Do you ever find it interesting that we've been together for 10 and a half years? We basically spend most of our time together.
We spend like a tremendous amount of time together. Like I'm not talking about as a matter of necessity, like our free time we love to spend together.
As a matter of necessity.
No, we spend a lot of time together.
Which matter of necessity? I don't have to spend lots of time with her, okay? Like it's not, but I do.
But we spend a lot of time together.
And we still don't run out of things to talk about. Isn't that cool?
No, we talk about all kinds of stuff. In fact, I think one of the ideas of me coming back on your show is not for me to be interviewed, although I'm sure that's part of the process. But it's because I think people need to know the kind of stuff we talk about so they get to see more of you, get to see a little bit of a behind the scenes look at Christina's life.
So we're thinking, in fact, of making this into a series this year, because I know that you guys really love it when I bring Alexander on and when we sit down and have chats. Yeah. And making this into a series, I want to have a separate name for it. And we're actually struggling to find a name. So if you could kindly leave in the comments some potential names for this series of me and Alexander on CATAMANIA, I would greatly appreciate it because we're a little bit puzzled. We've come up with some cheesy names that I'm not a fan of. So
they're bad names.
I would appreciate it if there was some.
But the idea is that the thing is, I know what kind of content Christina puts out, and I assure you, the things that we talk about are more interesting, more spicy, more controversial. We need to get some of that out there.
Why do you think that do I hold back, I guess, on some things? If I don't say everything. By the way, we're recording this from a homey setup in our slippers.
We got our
Please appreciate
mules.
Our slippers. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's, your Instagram is like short form reels, skits, right?
You want some water?
Yeah, I would love some water.
Also,
wow.
Not to be that person, but you're yelling a little bit.
Okay.
Alex has a tendency to speak really loudly. And I read somewhere
I have volume control issues.
I read somewhere that if one of the partners speaks really loudly, we have to make sure we don't spill this.
Yeah, let's not.
one of the partners in a marriage speaks really loudly, eventually one of them ends up with a hearing problem. So I really don't want to have.
I'm concerned.
I'm concerned. You're the
I'm
one who speaks loud, not me. Anyways,
But
you're saying I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Do I think that you hold back? No, I just think it's the nature of the content. We're not gonna. There's nobody in here. We're not gonna wake anybody up. No, I think it's the nature of the content, because on Instagram you're doing reels. It's comedy. It's got to be short, so people get to see you kind of in character. Let's say on the other side of the content spectrum, you've got your long form podcast where you are interviewing people. I just don't think you get interviewed a lot, which is really the idea of me coming on to do a weekly show. Again, it's not really about me. It's that people should, if people want to hear more of these conversations, if they want to hear this interesting stuff that you talk about, if they want to, be privy, we'll say, to those interesting conversations and perspectives, you are going to have to be asked some questions, right? I think that's what it comes down to.
Is that the plan? You're going to be asking
That's the
questions?
plan. I'm going to ask you questions.
Snap.
Yeah.
I didn't realize. I thought we were going to... I'm going to be the host, but apparently you're going to be the host.
We can co-host.
Wow.
Right?
Just like that, hey? Your wife spent
Mansplaining.
years building this, and then all of a sudden...
What do you want to talk about? You said...
There's a few subjects that some of my followers want to know. Some of my...
Like?
I hate saying... Not that I hate saying followers, but Instagram says
community.
Followers. My community, because it's really a community. There's such a sense of community. So some of the questions that my community wants to know. Mm-hmm. For example, the first one, how do we navigate conflict?
How do we navigate conflict? Ooh.
Not well.
Sometimes well. No, we do quite well. Sometimes well. Sometimes not the best. I'd say we do quite a good job of it. Again, we've been together for a long time. We still spend a ton of time.
Who does a good job, you or me? Or together? We do
you got to do it together. If you have an argument and one person's doing a really good job and the other person's doing a really shitty job, that argument is not resolved, right? I think the key for us, this is a good starting place, is if you are arguing with your beloved, it's so easy to get to focus on these get microscopic on these issues that really don't matter. I think for you and I, and what I mean is, there could be an argument that's about something big, but then it kind of filters down and it'll get kicked off, or some people like to use the word triggered, by some minor thing.
I hate that
so I think
word
it's important to find the big fundamental thing that you're actually arguing about. And then what I find really helps for you and I is that oftentimes when we talk things out, and we're going to come back to conversational styles, because I like the cooling off period, which I know is very frustrating for Christina. But in our arguments, what I find is that when we actually talk it out, we find what the big picture issue is. And then that's a good time we kind of bring back the fact that we have a common vision. We have a common future. We want the same thing. We have a future that we're building together. We have a shared vision board even. So we want the same thing. We find and I'm talking about the big arguments. I'm not talking about like the nonsense arguments when somebody's in a grouchy mood, or for me, if I'm hungry, I'll argue about things just cause. But like the big picture arguments, what helps is figuring out, what the actual key issue is, bringing it back to the fact that we want the same thing, and then working through it. And do you have any comments on conversational style, Christina?
As a matter of fact, I do.
Please.
Your conversational style is stonewalling.
I will neither confirm nor deny.
Let's start with the fact that Alexander went to school to learn how to fight with people, right? In a professional manner. You're a lawyer.
I am, in fact, a lawyer.
So there's two things that my conversational style, or how did you call it? Communication style?
I like communication style more.
Communication style is just right away, let's resolve this. Like if there's an issue, let's talk about it. Nobody needs to get offended. Let's tell each other how we feel.
Nobody needs to get offended.
And move on, right? Like if something is bothering me, I'm going to say it, and then we should resolve it. Or if something is bothering you, my expectation is that you will voice it and we will resolve it. Your communication style is very different. I
respectfully disagree with this approach.
You're from Eastern Europe as well. I don't get how that happened, but whatever. That's your style. I have a very good friend who's like that as well. But I think that's the biggest clash that we have is when I have, and maybe it's I'm not to be that person, but maybe it's a man's thing. Maybe men need to think about certain things for a little while. But for me, it's like saying. I'm gonna let it all out and let's resolve it right away. You will take time to process things. You'll take time to analyze things. And when you do that, to me, it very often
you'll take time to think, and I hate that.
Exactly. Why? Like, just, let's...
So this is...
Let's lay it all out on the table and resolve it. That's kind of my approach. So I find that's the most difficult part of it, is that if you have something, because I interpret it also as like, you're... Stonewalling, yeah. To me, it seems like you're stonewalling. Because I know you're like mad about something, or I know you're feeling... like something annoyed you maybe or something like that, right? But you're not telling me. And the other day actually we had a little bit of a disagreement. It wasn't anything bad, but there was something. Actually, this is so funny. And I was like expecting us to talk about it and resolve it. And instead, what you did? You went to the beach. Hear me out. I was on dinner duty that day. I told you I would make dinner. And I was like, hey, when you get from the beach, I'm going to start on dinner. And then I was like, but why should I start on dinner if you went to the beach? So you know what I did? Instead of being the bigger person that day, instead of waiting for you to come home and starting on dinner, I waited for you to come home and then I went to the beach. Nice.
I didn't even catch this. So there's apparently a confessions element to this conversation.
We still had dinner a little bit later, but it was just, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the beach. If he went to the beach, I could go to the beach too. So I
want to explain something about my take on this alleged stonewalling. And this is something that I've learned through our relationship. Like, we've been together again for 10 years. I was very immature when we met. You two were very immature when we met. So we've grown through our relationship. And one of the things that I learned at some point along the way is, and I think this applies, let's be honest, to everybody, is that if I'm fired up, that means emotions are in the mix. And if emotions are in the mix, or if you're fired up, I know I'm liable to say things I don't mean, just because I'm argumentative, right? So for me, it's critical that I don't say anything. I'm okay with it being uncomfortable. Sometimes you just got to be okay with uncomfortable situations, but I'm not saying anything until I've cooled off a little bit. I would rather say nothing until I've had a chance to kind of relax, and then we can have a discussion. I find this really, really helps, but it is important to communicate. It was just recently that I realized Christina told me that the stonewalling was annoying. She didn't like it. We realized we had different communication styles in this regard, but it's important to understand how your partner communicates. And I think now she has a much better sense that I'm just not going to do it, because whatever I say is not going to be an honest reflection of whatever the issue is. It's just going to be me blurting out
That's
things.
Actually a very interesting point, and I never thought of it that way. But damn it, don't you hate it when they're right? When you're like, oh, you're making too much sense. No, but actually that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because instead of in the heat of the moment maybe saying things that you don't mean to say,
right,
you let yourself cool off a little bit, and then with a clear head. But what I find is sometimes you don't even say anything at all. Right?
Yeah. Well,
that's what happens.
The thing is,
because I can appreciate about myself that I can get a little too fiery about things, which is not necessarily the best approach either. I'm not saying my approach is very good, but that's just how, like, if something is bothering me, I would rather just voice it right away and get over it, move on. Right?
By the way, if you guys want to know a great negotiation tactic,
I would love to know a great negotiation tactic. Please share.
This is one of my favorite. We had in law school, I went to a really good law school in Canada, and we had.
Are you like low-key sharing how you?
No. This is just, everybody should know this because it's fantastic. And we had a phenomenal 3-week intensive negotiation program. There were lawyers there who negotiate big oil and gas contracts. So it was excellent. And one of the guys did a particularly good job of sharing practical tips. And he had this one tip. I love this. If somebody is getting fired up, if somebody's getting emotional in a negotiation, an argument or whatever, give them a little bit of space, right? Give them a little bit of space to say things, because the more fired up somebody gets, the more outrageous the things are that they're going to say. And if somebody says something that's patently ridiculous or outrageous, just be quiet and let that awkward tension fill the room. And because it becomes in that moment so obvious that somebody just blurted out something ridiculous, that as that awkward tension builds, they'll, 99% of the time, they'll struggle to say something to qualify their statement or backpedal. It's brilliant. So
that's something that you use on me?
I don't use that on my wife because
I was just going to say, do you think that's the same tactics apply to communication with your spouse?
No. I mean, the thing is, in a negotiation...
I'm like, why is he sharing this?
It was just an interesting thought that came up.
But that's actually
in a negotiation, you're always keeping something. Mm-hmm. It's generally, if you're negotiating, you're not going to go in and be like, well, here's all my cards on the table. Take a look. But in a relationship, it's better. It's better if you do it that way. It's best to know what's really bothering everybody. How do we get through this? And the best way to do that is to share. That's why a conversation with your spouse is not a business negotiation, but I felt like sharing that tip. I love that one.
We should record a whole other episode on what you learned in that 3-week course.
It was good. It was epic.
You shared some of the stuff I remember years ago when you were taking it, but we should record a whole podcast episode. Because lawyers can be master negotiators.
There was
you're a master diplomat.
Yeah, I'm more of a diplomat than an advocate, which is helpful in relationships.
Wouldn't you say, though, that any conflict that we have, what matters the most is the intention behind all of that communication and the intention behind everything, really? Because you kind of have to understand that, okay, this is the problem that we're facing, whatever it may be, whether it's a communication problem or life, whatever it could be, and to figure out what the intention is from both of us in this relationship and understand, it's that whole thing. You saying certain things or you doing something in a situation doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that maybe you didn't handle a situation properly or I didn't handle something properly, right? Unless it obviously gets repeated without change. If something keeps bothering one of us and we keep doing the same things, and that's obviously a different thing. But
I mean, I think the key thing for us is that we have the common vision. I can't stress how important this is, because it would be
to take over the world. No, just kidding.
If you get into an argument with your spouse and it starts over something superficial and you dig and it turns out that it's something really deep, and then you find out as you're digging further that something deep means that you have a totally different vision for the future, that's tough. That's going to require, somebody's going to have to change, right? Do you know what I mean?
Or the relationship has to end.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nuclear option, obviously. Yeah. But for you and I, because we have a common vision, it's sometimes about, well, this is why I think like this. Because I think this is the best way to get to the common goal that we have. So yeah. That's how we communicate.
I don't think that was helpful at all. I feel like if somebody's listening to this right now and they're like, oh, I'm going to take some notes on how to handle conflict with my partner, I don't know if that was actually helpful.
No, I mean,
was it? What do you think?
Those are the two takeaways. Maybe don't shout things at each other from a heightened emotional state. Don't say things you don't mean, right? know your communication styles, and try to bring it back to a common vision. And if you don't have a common vision, then maybe that's something you should discuss, right?
Zone in on. I also will say, you and I we have very strong boundaries. You're like the best person I know in my life with setting boundaries. You're really, really good at it. I don't think you have anyone in your life.
Thank you.
No, honestly, I don't think you have anyone in your life with whom you don't have very clear set boundaries. And I don't think I've seen anyone in our life, like in your life, ever overstep the boundaries, which is actually something very almost like inspiring, because so many people struggle to establish boundaries with family, with friends, and you are really, really good at that. And you do it without the other, maybe it's because you went to law school, I don't know, but you do it without the other person ever feeling like they are being deprived of something. I feel like you also don't particularly care if the person is going to feel like they're getting offended by you setting the boundary, but you're just really good. I've noticed that a while ago. You're very good at setting boundaries with people, and myself included. I'm pretty good with it too. The reason why I'm bringing that up though is there's certain boundaries we have in our relationship that I think in a conflict, you see them. So for example, you and I think we yelled at each other maybe once or twice. And you and I fight. You and I do have fights, but we don't really yell at each other.
By the way, we're both pretty fiery, temperamental people. So
like if you think this guy, so do you remember one of my friends told me, she was like, do you understand Alex is the, she was sharing something with another friend of mine who has never met Alex. And she was like, do you understand Alex is the kind of person who never gets angry? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, and you know that how? I'm like, he never got angry at you, but believe me when I say he can get angry. But we fight and we're very fiery individuals.
And the reason I think the reason I point out that I think it's impressive that we've only really yelled at each other a few times ever is because we are liable to have our tempers flare up. That's just the way we are.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I am a very temperamental person and very fiery, but we have very strong boundaries. That we know that if we say something that's too much, or if we, you know, I mean, we don't call each other names because that's just, I never really understand. Maybe for some people,
yeah, I don't know what you would call like that.
But I don't know why.
Who does that reflect poorly on if you're calling your partner by names? We know people who do this.
Yeah.
Who shall remain unnamed.
Unnamed, yeah, but it's. I could just never do that. So I think that you and I have very strong boundaries for each other, which then, now that I reflect on it in a calm state of mind when we're not fighting, but now that I reflect on it, I think those boundaries also help to not go overboard, no matter how emotional you get. Because you know that whole thing, like you know that with certain people, and I'm sure everyone experienced this, but there are certain people with whom you can say certain things, you can crack a certain joke, and then with others, you just won't do that. Maybe because either you don't know them that well, or there's just a certain thing about them that you know it's not gonna fly. Like, you know, not in an offensive way or anything like that, but there's just certain level of, I guess, a boundary that is maintained.
Okay.
So I feel like with you and I, we have that as well. It's like, you're my husband, I'm your wife, and like there's certain things that we don't say to each other, no matter how angry we are. We cool off. And
I think we've covered that. That's our full approach on how we deal with arguments. I don't think anything else would be speculation or philosophical in nature. This does tie into, you know, the boundaries and everything. It does tie into the fact that, you know, I think we're, by the way, like 20 minutes in, not to be the timekeeper, so maybe you want to save this for the next discussion. But the whole concept of we are not best friends. I'm not looking for a best friend in my wife. For some people that works. We were talking about this just while we were cruising around in the golf cart. Yeah,
I've said this a number. Do you know how fired up people get about that? How much people attack me online?
This doesn't make any sense to me. But for us, for Christina and I, that's not the kind of relationship we want. The way I behave with my best friend is not how I behave with my wife. That doesn't mean there's any faking or pretending going on. It's just you have different relationships. To me, it's like if you can't have different types of relationships in your life, I think you're that doesn't mean that means you're missing out on something. Not all the relationships should be the same, right?
No, well, think about it. I always say this, like, you're not the same with your mother as you are with your husband. You're not the same with your brother. Like, everyone has a different role in your life, and that's okay. And yeah, you're right. For some people, it might work. But for me, I never wanted that level of, for lack of a better word, comfort. Like, I don't want to get too comfortable with you from the perspective of, like, I want you to be my husband. I want you to look at me as your wife. Again, it works.
I don't know if comfort is the right.
What would be the right?
Correct me if I'm wrong.
What would be the right word here?
I think there's comfort's not the word. Formality is not the word either. But
like a mystery. I always say that there's a certain level of mystery that I strive to maintain with you.
Yeah, a certain level of mystery, and there's a certain level of healthy respect for the fact that a marriage is sacred, right?
Yeah.
A friendships are absolutely critical, and they're very important, and you're not going to be a happy person without friendships. The quality of your friendships is huge in terms of quality of your life. But a marriage is something sacred. This is a sacred union that is your Soviet Union, and you're building a life together. You might build a family together. It's something that needs to be treated with all due respect in a way that is different from a friendship. That's my opinion. There's a certain respect you have to bring, that there's certain things you don't say to a spouse. There's certain motions you go through. When you're Christina and I, we still go on dates. What does that mean? That means that you put in a little bit of effort. You don't just take the relationship for granted. You don't, and some people do this and it works for them. But, some people give up on taking care of themselves, not getting dressed up for your partner. This, I think, is a tremendous mistake. But a marriage, again, it's sacred, which means I think a certain energy needs to be brought into the relationship. And you have to maintain a certain standard, let's say, that you wouldn't have to maintain with friends, perhaps, in terms of how you communicate, how you behave with your significant other.
I agree with you 100%. Are we at our time? Actually?
We're at time. Let's wrap this one up.
Okay, we're gonna wrap this one up, and we are gonna be back because there's so many more.
Let's talk about something juicier now that we're warmed up.
We're gonna be back with something juicier. We might even just record it
immediately.
Yeah, immediately. So we'll be back in the next episode with something even juicier. And thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I will see you next week, depending on when this airs, but I think I'll see you next week. Stay blessed.